On this episode of Whitetail Cribs, we're headed to Clarion County, Pennsylvania to visit with Jim Reed. Jim is a small business owner that lives for the outdoors. Get ready to tour a small town farm filled with a rich hunting heritage, a 340-inch bull elk, and much more. If you want to be featured on Whitetail Cribs, head to the link in the description and fill out the short application. Now let's get into the episode.
The Exodus team is traveling around the United States to take a look inside the trophy rooms of some of the most interesting whitetail hunters in the country. From giant bucks, unique racks, and riveting stories, welcome to Whitetail Cribs.
How's it going? Welcome to the Reed Farm. Come on in. Whitetail Cribs in the house. I'm honored. I'm Jim Reed, and this is our farm. And this is my lovely bride of 32 years, Sue. And we met up here in Clarion way back in the 80s at Clarion University. And we had no reason to leave. She's from Johnstown, I'm from Pittsburgh, and we both love the outdoors, and we couldn't think of a better place to hang our hat than this area. It's been quite a ride, but welcome. And I gotta brag about my two kids. They don't brag, but that's my prerogative. This is David, my son. He is he's not a hunter, but he's absolutely probably the best outdoorsman I know. He's a big mountain climber. He's hiking in the woods all the time. In fact, he's a Penn State grad engineer, and he's just took a leave from his job in Pittsburgh, and he's on his way out to fight forest fires for the national park. So, yeah, he's couldn't be prouder of Dave. And then my daughter. She's the youngest, that's Jenny. She's a recent grad of PA Medical School, and she's my hunter. And we'll talk more about Jenny later on in the big room. I want to show you a couple things on the farm before I go into the trophy room. Can't forget this. We are very faithful people. We know who's really in charge. And the playground that he gives us between the woods and water that we all get to play in, it blows our mind, and we take advantage of it. So this is, he's in charge for sure. Okay, some of our beef cattle is, again, it's kind of a hobby, but we still eat them, and we still sell them, and we still give them away to some of the family and friends. So we work hard at this, but we have this particular cow. He is we call him Miracle on Ice. He was born in the middle of February 3 years ago, and he was literally a block of ice when I got to him. Mama was supposed to be in the barn. She broke out of the barn, and she had it overnight, and we didn't get to it in time. And when I grabbed it, I thought it was dead. Put it on the back of the four-wheeler to go bury it, and the thing started just twitching a little bit. And this thing literally was a block of ice. I mean, it was frozen stiff. So Sue and Jenny and Dave, they all got in with the towels, and we nursed it back to life, and here it ends up being our biggest prize, 83-inch wide spread longhorn. It's just amazing. So he's definitely a miracle on ice, but here, I want to show you him if we can get him over here. Hey, you got to come look at my skinning shed. I'm pretty proud of this. I used to go to a camp up in Tynesta when I was a kid, and this is a picture they had on the wall. And this is a pretty common picture, I think. You see it in a lot of camps. Well, I was appraising a camp when we bought this place, and it had it in the camp. And the guy was going to pitch it. He literally had a bonfire going, and he was throwing a bunch of stuff out. It was an estate. And I grabbed that from him because that reminded me a lot when I was a kid at that camp. But yeah, so I thought that's a good spot for it. It's pretty nicked up. Okay, let's go back to the house. I want to show you something in the garage first, so come on. All right, let's go into the garage. Okay, this is our farm truck. This reminded me so much of my grandpap. He and I ran a lot of warehousing down in Pittsburgh, and he had a truck that looked a lot like this. And when I saw it, it didn't have the can of paint on it that it has now, but it absolutely was dead on to the truck my grandpap and I used to do a lot of work in together. And just like my dad, he was a godsend. He lived a block away, and I spent actually more time growing up with my grandpap than my dad because my dad was always working. But anyway, it's not a show truck or anything. But when the kids or the nephews come up, we rip and tear with it and do the donuts in the fields and all that jazz. And so far, we haven't popped the clutch. I actually got an antique plate, even though I changed the wheels a little bit on it. But it's 3 on the tree, 54 F100, and it goes to 0 to 60 in about 10 minutes. but it's my baby, and it's not a nice truck that you're afraid to use it. We use it. For some reason, most of our turkeys end up in the garage. These are some of the ones we've gotten over the years. This is probably the most special. Jenny's first turkey. I knew there was one roosted on the corner of the one field, and she had to go to school, and I talked her into, instead of jumping on the bus, to go down after that turkey, and we called it in, and then she was off to school, and she didn't miss a beat. The one thing with the Game Commission, people bitch a lot about the Game Commission and their decision making, and they deserve some of that scrutiny. Well, one thing they did get right is the antler restrictions. I'm convinced of that. There's more guys now that are shooting the biggest bucks of their lives than ever before. Pre-antler restriction, we were tickled pink to shoot this stuff. And I'm not judging that. We loved it. So they enacted the antler restrictions, and within a year or two, every one of my brothers, including myself, and all my buddies, we really started shooting bigger bucks around here. And it does get you another year on that buck. And around here in a high pressure area, that does make a difference. Now, some people are complaining about, well, they're watering down the genetic pool with letting these spikes and 4 points live that won't get any better. And there might be some truth to that. That is a good example of what we used to shoot and be happy with. And then as we go into the big room, we'll show you what we've been finding in our little part of the world anyway. Okay, this is my first turkey, spring bird that is, and that's what got me addicted to these birds. It was in a farm we used to own, and in the evenings when I was working outside, this thing was hammering 2 nights in a row, and very rarely have ever heard gobbles in the evening, especially in these parts. So he was one that I tried for 2 days in a row to call him in, and I'm an old slate caller, and it didn't work. And I called my good buddy Terry Blake, and he had him in on a string, and that was my first bird. And it just got more and more addicting to a point where you start missing out on work, or you hit a wall at 2 p.m. at work and everything else. But it is so worth it. But since then, we've hunted a lot together, and the only other caller I know that's just as good as Terry is my best buddy, turkey buddy, that is Derwin Winter. He can call like no one else except Terry. Okay, this is where we do most of our living. This is where all our animal mounts and whatnot, outdoor related, goes into. Pretty much the rest of the house is other decor, but she did give me one room that I could go crazy with, and this is a cool room to do it in. So the big thing for us, for Sue and I, especially as we get older, is to expose and mentor our nieces, nephews, friends, kids, things like that. And it's just worked out tremendously for my brothers and their kids and my friends and their kids. And it's amazing when you start thinking about it. Over the last 10 years, I think all my brothers, all my nieces and nephews that hunt have all shot their biggest bucks on this farm. And we're in an area that's pretty high pressure. So we kind of run it like an outfitting business. We try to give them a good encounter with deer, and then if they get a buck, it's just bonus. But I could go on and name all my nephews and nieces, but I'm not going to. They know who they are. But it really is a cool thing when you get to share what we've worked very hard for. And it does mean a lot. And these people are from the cities, and they don't get to experience this kind of outdoor related fun. And we come home to it every day, and we're blessed. And I think sometimes we take it for granted. And I got to give a shout out to my brothers. I grew up with these chuckleheads. We we cut our teeth hunting rabbits and pheasants, and we had beagles growing up. I pulled Dad out of retirement. He gave up hunting. He got shot in the chest by my uncle before I even was in. I was 11 or 12, and he was real hesitant about me going into the hunting thing. And I pressed and pressed. There was no denying it. So finally, he let me go, and we went to a hunter safety course, and he picked my buddy and I up. And on the way home, he said, "They teach you anything about safety?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what pretty much it was about." And then he told me what happened. Now I felt bad because I pressed him so hard. But he come out of retirement, and he's dying right now in Pittsburgh. And he told me that those were some of his best times. But yeah, to Dad, my brothers, and we had the world by the nads when we were rabbit hunting and pheasant hunting. And anyway, that's the wall of shame, I guess, if you want to call it. My daughter, I got to talk about Jenny. She was my hunter. Again, David, he hunted a little bit, but he just wasn't into it. But Jenny, she embraced it. And when she was 12, she wasn't strong enough to pull back a bow. And we tried to tell her about a crossbow, and she wanted to shoot a bow just like her daddy. So the next summer was probably the coolest summer. We spent almost every night shooting in the backyard, 3D shoots, and she finally got up to 45 pounds. So when she was 13, second day in the stand, she shoots this 4-point, and that was, if any dad sees their kid shoot their first animal, it's hard to explain unless you're there. It was awesome. And then since then, she's gotten pretty picky. So she took a sabbatical from hunting. She just didn't have the time. She's been on rotations. And here this last fall, she gave me a call between rotations, says, "Hey, I'd like to come hunt with you one day." So Monday, there we were in the middle of late October this year. And she was in the stand 10 minutes, and she shot the biggest buck of her life. And he hit the Pope and Young mark, if that means anything. It was just awesome to have her for a few precious hours in the stand this year. It was cool. To the point of antler restrictions, that buck up there, it's a wide and web 7-point. It's a 22-inch spread buck. And the year before, I know it was the same buck, he was a spike that was 18 inches wide. And he got through hunter after hunter on our farm because it wasn't legal and none of the junior hunters had a crack at it. So the next summer, he starts webbing out, and I thought, man, that is a really cool buck. And that was my hit list buck. But the wind was really bad that beginning of the season, where it took me almost 7 days to get back here where I wanted to hunt him. And I remember getting back there at about 3:30, and doesn't he show up 2 minutes later after I get in my stand? And I'm not ready for him, but he's just grazing along behind a couple doe on the edge of a field. And I had a mark at 40 yards, and the doe were going to come downwind of me, so I was going to maybe shoot him at 40, knowing them doe were going to get to a bad point. But there was another area that he could have went. I was up in a big oak in a lock-on. So I'm ready, and this thing stands there for 15 minutes. I had no idea what he was doing, but he wasn't spooked or on high alert or anything, to a point where I had to kind of just drop down and reposition a little bit. So I go like this, and I looked out at them doe real quick, and I look back, and he's gone. I'm like, what the frick? And he had, within that little bit of, I'm talking more than 5 seconds when I did this and reposition, all of a sudden, 15 minutes, he sits in one spot, and all of a sudden, he's out at that 25-yard mark. So I'm still thinking 40 on my brain, like, oh my God, he's moving. So I stop him, and I shoot, and I graze his back. And I was just sick. And he runs into a cornfield, and he must have been confused where that arrow came from. And he angles right back, quartering away at me at 28 yards, looks straight up at me, watches me knock another arrow, and I double lung him. I I have the worst and best luck. That's my best friend Scott Bauer says it's the Jim Reed factor. But that's my post antler restriction first buck I took. And then these ones along here, I don't get them mounted anymore, and maybe these aren't mountable or worthy of being mounted. But some of these buck, the coolest buck I think as far as a hunting story is a buck we called Curly, because he had this curly cue on him. And I was actually in a tree when my wife called me frantically about her big buck she had just shot. And I was watching him dog a doe towards me. And when she called me, I was wrestling with, well, what am I doing here? So I didn't know if she was still in the stand, and everyone knows when they shoot a buck like that, the nerves and everything else, I didn't want her to come down out of that stand without me getting down there. So I come down the stand, and that doe that he was chasing, that buck at about 60 yards, are looking at me like, was he a big squirrel or what? They never ran. So I didn't tag, and then in rifle, it was the last day of the season in rifle, and I had to farm myself for the first time. All the hunters and relatives and that, they were in and out. And I was just more counting inventory of what made it, small bucks. And I was on my second buck, two 4-points come through, and that was cool. I wasn't even really hunting because I thought it was pretty well smoked out. And I thought this one was dead. I thought the neighbor got him. And then he shows up on this ridge. I just see this white rack, and he's about ready to jump down over the hill. And I stop him before I even have a rifle in my hand. I grab the rifle, don't even remember if I loaded it, and I shot it. Last minute, last day, rifle. And it just kind of poetic justice that I walked away from that one to run down to get with my wife on her buck. This 16-point, that's my biggest whitetail. And that went north of 150, and that's around here, that's pretty special. To get a deer to be 3.5 to 4.5 years old, it is a minor miracle. And I hunted him for 2 years. I would have shot him the year before, but I just screwed up on him twice. And he was probably 130 the year before. And that's my biggest one. And the biggest buck of our whole posse, if you will, had to be my wife. She's been hunting 2 years. And her second year, it was the last day of archery, the last hour. And she smoked this thing. And I pride myself on knowing our inventory, and I trail cam a lot. And we've never seen that buck. And it's just one of those special moments or evenings that I'm still in shock. I mean, the year that she shot this 2 years ago, she found the shed from Big John, which is on one of these two bucks here, this buck here. This is actually a shed that I found in Pittsburgh when I was a kid, this 10-point. And then she found this shed here on the farm, and I thought, yeah, they kind of match. And so I put it on a deer that had the smaller rack. But anyway, she found that big shed. She shot the biggest buck we've ever shot, and that was like high 150s is what it scores. And then she hits this. She was coming home from choir practice that same year, and she hits this freaking Goliath of a buck with the car. And when she come home, she said she hit a buck. She said it was the biggest buck she's ever seen. And I'm like, bigger than that? She says, yes. So I went down there where she hit it, and there was just fragments of an antler. And she said it ran off, and I couldn't find a deer. So eventually, later on in the year, we got a hold of his shed from the other side that was intact. And that is a freaking hog. And that was her, though. I mean, she couldn't turn a corner without bumping into a big buck or whatever. But anyway, I've had I'm a pretty sick dude as far as health. And when I was in my 20s, I was in Pittsburgh for a long time, almost died a couple times. And they've taken a lot of my insides out with what they call Crohn's disease. So I was going to go out west when I got older and retired. I completely changed things when I was in my upper 20s, and it's a progressive disease, so I didn't know I was going to make 30 or not. So with my wife's blessings, we had just had the 2 kids. We were busy, we strapped with money and everything, but I always wanted to go out west. And I've been blessed to elk hunt 3 different times, and I've come back with 3 elk. My first one was a raggy 4x4 in Colorado, north of Steamboat. My second one was a big elk in Utah, that ended up having swords like crazy. And the cool thing about that elk was it has the eye guard that actually comes down over the face of that elk. And then this is now these two are rifle. This one was an archery hunt over the counter tag that I relied on advice from the kid from Walmart on where a good place would go to maybe cherry pick a limited draw area and just hunt on the perimeter of that on the public. And the advice paid off. I ended up shooting this 340 elk with a muzzy fixed broadhead at 10 yards looking straight at me. And that hunt was just, I couldn't even walk after I shot it. I was shaken up so bad. But anyway, this is our great room. This is a time of the year when I should be turkey hunting and not doing this. So I'm going to send you out the front door. Thanks for coming. I love your show. And I do use the heck out of your trail cams too. And they're second to none. And I'm not just saying that to be nice. I'm pretty critical on some of the other ones. So I hope you get out in the woods. Rumor has it you've had some fun with them birds. But anyway, you got to go. But I'm not going to be mean about it. You can come back anytime. See you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Whitetail Cribs. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you're wondering who the heck we are and how the heck we travel across the country to record these episodes, we are Exodus Trail Cameras and simply believe quality trail cameras should not cost a fortune. That's why 5 years ago, we started a direct-to-consumer company to tackle some of the biggest frustrations we've seen as typical trail camera users: product longevity, product performance, and customer service. We simply build cameras that flat out work in the harshest conditions and back them up with best-in-class customer service. We're proud to say we have the industry's leading 5-year warranty that even includes theft and accidental damage coverage. If you'd like to learn more about Exodus and the products we have to offer, click the link in the description and head over to our website. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in a comment below or shoot us an email.